What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie Megalopolis. Here's a quick synopsis. Prominent architect Caesar Catalina battles Mayor Frank Cicero for control of the city New Rome. The film stars Adam Driver, Giancarlo Esposito, Natalie Emanuel, Aubrey Plaza, Jon Voight, Shia LaBeouf, Lawrence Fishburne, Dustin Hoffman, and Jason Schwartzman. Standout performances. At first, Adam Driver was getting a ton of credit for his quest to work with legendary living filmmakers. Martin Scorsese on Silence, Spike Lee on BlacKkKlansman, and Ridley Scott on both House of Gucci and The Last Duel, among others. It's the last two films that have people starting to question that strategy. The first, Michael Mann's Ferrari, where Driver played Enzo Ferrari. That to me was a great movie and a great performance. The second is this film, Megalopolis, and the reason people are giving Driver major flack for these films is the lack of commercial success, and my reaction to that is, that was once a fair model to rate movie stars against, but maybe now more than ever we need to change that, especially with an actor like Adam Driver. I don't think Adam Driver is the best actor working today, but I do believe he is the best leading man. He can fit into just about any movie. He never feels out of place. Driver is working with the directors he wants to work with and doing really solid work. I wouldn't call Driver's work in Megalopolis as his career best, but he's very compelling as Caesar Catalina, who is the type of character that we are seeing a lot of in real life right now, a person with a lot of big ideas and the financial backing to make them happen, and is seeking power from behind the scenes. He's also mourning the loss of his wife. I know that this movie is not what people want Driver to be doing. They wanted the rumors that he would be in Fantastic Four to be true, but this is a guy who's been in Star Wars. He feels done with franchises for now. He does movies based on the directors. Now, do I believe there's a way that Adam Driver could please both sides of the table? Yes, he can work with great filmmakers and also be in really high commercial movies. I mean, could you imagine Adam Driver popping up in a Christopher Nolan movie? Driver is next going to work with what I believe to be another stellar filmmaker, James Gray, for his next film, Paper Tiger, with Anne Hathaway and Jeremy Strong, and is once again working with director Jim Jarmusch for a third time on the film Father, Mother, Sister, Brother with Cate Blanchett and Vicky Krieps. Driver is really good in Megalopolis, however, he does not give, in my opinion, the best performance. That honor goes to Aubrey Plaza. Some will watch this movie and be surprised with what Plaza does as Wow Platinum, a gossip TV personality who will do anything for fame and success. But if you really followed the career of the sitcom star, you know she's unpredictable with her choices of movies and performances. Since 2020, Plaza's been in Black Bear, a movie that plays with what's real and what isn't, Happiest Season, a holiday romantic comedy where Plaza gives a scene-stealing performance, Emily the Criminal, where she fully commits to and pulls off an accent, Operation Ruse de Guerre, a Guy Ritchie action flick, and this year she not only has Megalopolis, she also has the film My Old Ass from writer-director Megan Park, where she plays a character who is visiting her younger self. Plaza has done a good job of not being typecast as April Ludgate, her Parks and Rec character. She's branched out and has become a good actress, and is the best thing about Megalopolis. And Plaza has admitted to liking the process of making the film, telling Kyle Buchanan of the New York Times, quote, "It's taken a long time, but I finally found what I've been looking for, which is having Francis direct me in a way that was fully inspiring and not about end result. When you're working with Coppola, anything and everything is on the table," end quote. Plaza also talked to Buchanan about how improvising on the movie was key to her performance. Quote, "If you weren't, then you'd get eaten alive. You had to be confident and have a plan because it's not all on the page," end quote. Plaza will next star in the films Animal Friends with Ryan Reynolds and Vince Vaughn, and Honey Dome with Margaret Qualley and Chris Evans. And finally, Lawrence Fishburne has a long history with writer-director Francis Ford Coppola, appearing in his earlier films Apocalypse Now, Rumblefish, and The Cotton Club. I've recently watched a lot of Fishburne's movies and am now now of the belief that Fishburne is one of the greats. I was particularly impressed with his work in John Singleton's Boys in the Hood and Abel Ferrara's King of New York. Lawrence Fishburne should be an Oscar winner by now. I know people fixate on the Matrix movies when it comes to him, but he's had a great career outside of those. In Megalopolis, Fishburne plays Fundi Romaine, Caesar's driver and close confidant, and is the film's narrator. He might not be given a great arc in the film, but I felt his presence. Lawrence Fishburne is a great actor. Fishburne's next movie, The Amateur, has a cast that includes Rami Malek, Rachel Brosnahan, and Jon Bernthal. Megalopolis is one of those rare movies where more people want to talk about the director over the actors, and that's the case with this film because its writer-director is none other than Francis Ford Coppola, who made the Godfather trilogy. Ever heard of it? He was also the man behind Apocalypse Now and The Conversation, and is viewed as one of the best directors of all time. I also personally love Bram Stoker's Dracula and The Rainmaker. My belief about Coppola is he's a man that loves his own mythology, that he's someone whose belief in himself worked out famously with Apocalypse Now, a movie in which he put a lot of his own money into, which he did once again for Megalopolis, and that's the narrative the media has ran with, that Coppola is betting on himself. It's the exact same situation with Kevin Costner with his Western epic Horizon. Both men were trying to recreate their own magic. Costner was trying to recreate Dances with Wolves, while Coppola was trying to recreate the feeling of Apocalypse Now, that he's a mad genius who, through all the chaos, ends up making great movies. And unfortunately, that's not the consensus when it comes to Megalopolis. Let's talk about the movie itself. I like Megalopolis. It's an ideas movie, and some of them click, some of them don't. One that did resonate for me is the idea that in today's world, there are two kinds of people in power: those who run in politics and those with large amounts of money, and the dynamic between the two can be uncomfortable, and that's the case with drivers, Caesar, and the mayor of New Rome, Frank Cicero, played by Giancarlo Esposito. What I will say about Megalopolis is this is a movie that does not care about plot or structure, which is something that doesn't bother me, but I can fully understand someone who is confused by it. The other big critique of this movie has been the performance of Natalie Emmanuel, who plays Julia Cicero, the love interest of Driver's character. Coppola has made a famous movie that was brought down by one performance, The Godfather Part 3, and my take is this is not the exact same situation. I think Emmanuel is fine in the movie and makes the most out of what the movie gives her. She's solely there to be the main conflict other than power between Driver and Esposito's character. I don't think it's a great role no matter who is playing the part. She does have one great quote about Caesar where she calls him man of the future, so obsessed by the past. The thing that so many people are struggling with this movie, including myself, is this idea that Francis Ford Coppola wanted to make this movie for decades, and this is the final product. Like, I think we all believe that if a master like this was thinking about a project for decades, it would wind up being a masterpiece. Instead, it's just okay to good. Megalopolis is being both overpraised and overcriticized, and when it comes to the overpraised aspect, it has to do with Coppola's career. There are some who don't want to say he didn't make a great movie, and as someone who admires many, many great filmmakers, I understand that mindset. When you respect a director, you want to come to his defense when people are piling on. Christopher Nolan is my favorite director. If he made a bad movie, I don't know how I would deal with that. When it comes to the criticisms of Megalopolis, I've seen people take scenes from this movie online out of context to say how bad of a film this is. If you watch Megalopolis from beginning to end, it is at least somewhat coherent. It's imperfect, but you can tell what the director is going for, even if you don't fully agree with it. The movie feels like a master putting everything he has into his last film. My reading of the situation is Francis Ford Coppola had absolutely no interest in making a hit movie or had had very little interest in making a movie that would garner him Oscar buzz. And I believe that's what many people predicted that this would be the ultimate swan song, that we would be able to nominate Francis Ford Coppola for Best Director one final time, that he had this great actor, Adam Driver, that he was going to get an all-time great performance out of him, and that's simply not the case. And what you're left with Megalopolis is a pretty weird movie. Box office. Megalopolis has made just under $14 million, which is not very good given the fact that it cost north of $120 million. My thoughts are this. For a movie like this to be a hit in 2024, it needed way more star power. And here's some stars who were once connected to this project. Cate Blanchett, Oscar Isaac, Forrest Whitaker, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Zendaya, and that would have immensely helped this movie, because those are relevant stars. Instead of the aging stars like Jon Voight and Dustin Hoffman, the movie is left with. I think of the names I just listed, the name Zendaya would have had the biggest impact on this movie. People would have seeked this movie out a little bit more if Zendaya was playing the Natalie Emmanuel role, which I suspect was the role she was up for. Like, put Zendaya in that part, and this movie gets a lot more eyeballs. I was reading that Cate Blanchett was supposed to play WoW Platinum. I mean, I don't want to see her instead of Aubrey Plaza, but more people watch this movie if that part is being played by Cate Blanchett over Plaza. Really, the only actors in this movie who have had recent box office success are Adam Driver, and that's really only because of the Star Wars franchise, and Lawrence Fishburne, who has had a minor role in the John Wick movies. Overall, Coppola put together an interesting cast, but a cast that lacks real star power. People don't care about Shia LaBeouf's movie career in the year 2024. We've moved on, we're over it. It's also just for a director's final movie like Francis Ford Coppola, I really thought that he would just put together an ensemble of major famous actors, and that was not the case. Yes, it's impressive that he was able to get Adam Driver to lead this movie. But after that, none of those big names I mentioned agreed to be in this movie, and I know it probably has to do with scheduling, but you couldn't get any of those big names. Like, I think we all believe for Quentin Tarantino's 10th and final film, all the big names are going to come out to be in that movie. It probably has to do with the fact that Francis Ford Coppola, in my opinion, really hadn't made a good movie since 1997's The Rainmaker. And that was back when Matt Damon was just becoming a big name. That was the same year he had Good Will Hunting. That's how long it's been since Francis Ford Coppola made a good movie. Matt Damon wasn't even a big movie star yet. I think the response to this movie, or the lack of response to this movie, has something really interesting to say about how we feel about auteur filmmakers. Yes, we love the idea of the writer-directors who control everything about their movies. We still talk about those kind of directors all of the time. The Quentin Tarantinos, the Paul Thomas Andersons. We are like, what is this movie about? As long as the quality is really great and the acting is great. But the thing we question the most is, what is the director trying to say with this movie? And I think the only people who care about what Megalopolis is trying to say are die-hard movie fans and critics. I think the average moviegoer had absolutely no interest in Francis Ford Coppola's final movie. And I do think it all comes down to relevancy. The man is not as relevant as he was in the 70s when he was at the height of his powers. I mean, he can make a movie like Apocalypse Now, they can make a documentary about it, and we'll talk about the making of that movie until the end of time, because the people from that generation were obsessed with that. He is no longer an auteur in the eyes of younger people. He's not on that same level. We don't care about him in that same way, and this movie is evidence of that. I was interested in seeing this movie because I am a big movie fan, and I loved his earlier works. My point is, I just think there comes a time where we're no longer obsessed with these kind of auteur filmmakers, especially when they go away for a long while. Like, could the same thing happen for Quentin Tarantino? This makes me think that Quentin Quentin Tarantino might be on the right path, that his next movie should probably be his last movie. I mean, make a film while you're still relevant, because it's kind of sad how this all played out. The media was talking about this movie all of the time. I first heard about it when that all-star cast was announced. I'm like, Francis Ford Coppola's final movie is going to have Oscar Isaac, Cate Blanchett, and Zendaya. Sign me up for that immediately. And then what I end up with is a movie with a sole movie star. And really probably the only reason he was able to get Adam Driver is because Adam Driver has made it his life's mission to work with every great director he's ever admired. I am left wondering if any other relevant movie star would have played the part of Caesar. Again, at one point Oscar Isaac was attached, but he left the project. I mean, if it wasn't for Driver, would this movie have no movie stars? That's wild to think about. So after all that talk for this movie, it ends up making a measly $14 million at the box office, and the only reason I'm talking about it on this podcast is because I want to talk about Francis Ford Coppola, and I want to talk about Adam Driver. But really, the movie isn't as relevant as I thought it was going to be. And what's interesting about this movie is I think the bad performances come from the most recognizable stars in it. I mean, Jon Voight in this movie. Jon Voight is one of the best parts about 1997's The Rainmaker. I loved him in that movie. I love Jon Voight in Michael Mann's Heat as well. I mean, he is just on a different kind of movie in Megalopolis. He does not work in this role at all. And then you have two-time Oscar winner Dustin Hoffman in like this little bit part in Megalopolis. And I'm like, what is Dustin Hoffman doing in this movie? And I felt the exact same way about Jason Schwartzman. Like, why did you give these people these bit roles that have absolutely no meaning behind them? As you can tell, I'm somewhere in the middle between thinking this movie is a complete and total disaster and also admiring the movie's ambition. Like, I do like the fact that he spent all of this money to make the movie he wanted to make. And it is very interesting. I mean, you can call Megalopolis a lot of things. Boring is not one of them. So another reason why I wanted to talk about this movie on this podcast is I believe that all the talk surrounding this movie has not been about the movie itself. It's been about all of the other stuff. It's been about Francis Ford Coppola putting all of his money into it. It's been about the chaotic nature of how he made the movie. Like, I don't feel like really anyone is talking about the movie itself. And I do think there are some really intriguing elements in the movie. And I think if the movie honed in more on those elements, it could have ended up being a great movie. So one of the things that I've heard Francis Ford Coppola talk about how his great movies, when they were first made, were not viewed as great movies. The Godfather Part 2, and Apocalypse Now. Now, no one in their right minds believes that Megalopolis will one day be viewed as a great movie. But could the overall feeling of this movie become more positive as the years go by? Absolutely. Because if you give this movie a chance, you will see really good performances from two really intriguing actors, Adam Driver and Aubrey Plaza. They fully understand the movie they're in. They're trying to fit into Coppola's vision and are successful in it. I haven't talked about Giancarlo Esposito in this movie at all because I think he's a great actor who was wasted in this movie. Like, I think that role is the role that if you amp that one up and you got rid of some of those other characters like Dustin Hoffman's and Jon Voight's and you just went all in on this movie being a battle between Adam Driver, Giancarlo Esposito with a mix of Aubrey Plaza, I think the movie ends up being a lot better. One final note I have about the movie is I just think it's trying way too hard to relate to today's culture. Like, he's trying to comment on the influence of pop stars. He's trying to comment on our obsession with celebrity, and he's also trying to comment on modern politics. Now, I would say that's too many elements for one movie, and if he had focused solely on one of those elements, you could end up saying saying a great deal about them. But when they're mixed in together all into one movie, you kind of lose the message. Maybe the biggest critique I have of the movie is I don't know how writer-director Francis Ford Coppola feels about Adam Driver's Caesar. Does he view him as a good guy? Does he view him as a bad guy? Does he view himself like Caesar? I just don't know, and I kind of want the answers. Maybe by rewatching the movie, I'll get some of those answers. Because if you, like me, watch Megalopolis, you will be left with a lot of questions. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I recommend you check out Francis Ford's Megalopolis. Next week on the podcast, it's a big one. I'm talking about Ridley Scott's Gladiator 2 starring Paul Mescal, Denzel Washington, and Pedro Pascal. So tune into that and please rate, review, and subscribe.